The vast control room of the Imperial flagship Dominion hummed with activity. Holographic displays illuminated the faces of Zapirian officers as they monitored the borders of their territory. Commander Vexar stood tall, his slender, blue-skinned form perfectly still as he observed the routine patrol data. The Galactic Empire, formerly known as the Zapirian Hegemony, had maintained unchallenged military superiority across 3 spiral arms for centuries. "Status report on Sector 7, Vexar commanded, his voice carrying the distinctive metallic undertone of the core world's accent. "All clear, Commander," replied the officer at the scanner station. "Patrol drones report no anomalies along the established perimeter." Vexar nodded with satisfaction. The Empire's military might was not merely about weaponry, but precision, discipline, and technological superiority. Their warships were marvels of engineering, capable of destroying small moons and projecting power across vast distances of space. The military doctrine that had served them for generations was simple yet effective. Overwhelming force, superior technology, and swift action against any threat. Colonel Veltar entered the command deck, his ceremonial armor glinting under the blue lights. As the tactical advisor to Fleet Admiral Creon, his presence always commanded respect. "Commander," he acknowledged Vexar with a slight nod. "The Admiral requests your presence for the strategic briefing. The Emperor has expressed concerns about the increasing activity in the Outer Rim territories." The Galactic Empire was structured along clear geographical and political lines. The core worlds represented the heart of Zapirian civilization, advanced, wealthy, and culturally sophisticated. These 57 systems enjoyed the full protection and privileges of Imperial citizenship. In contrast, the Outer Rim territories were frontier worlds, less developed and considered of strategic rather than cultural importance. They served primarily as buffer zones and resource extraction points. "The Outer Rim has always been unstable," Vexar commented as they walked toward the briefing chamber. "Primitive species, pirate factions, and the occasional resource dispute." Veltar's expression remained neutral. "This time, intelligence suggests something different. Unusual energy signatures, communication patterns that don't match known entities. Another minor species attempting to establish itself beyond its natural boundaries," Vexar suggested with a dismissive wave. "We've seen this pattern before." "Perhaps," Veltar replied, his tone suggesting he wasn't convinced. "But Admiral Creon believes this warrants investigation, particularly given the latest reports about human activity." Vexar almost laughed. Humans were hardly worth mentioning in strategic briefings. They were refugees. Essentially, the remains of a species that had been forced to abandon their homeworld generations ago. Their small fleet of civilian vessels had been wandering through various sectors for decades, stopping only to mine resources or trade with minor powers. The Empire tolerated their presence as one might tolerate harmless nomads. The briefing room doors slid open, revealing Fleet Admiral Creon seated at the head of the table. His age was evident in the pale gray of his skin, but his eyes retained the sharp intelligence that had made him the Empire's most decorated military leader. "Commander Vexar," Creon acknowledged. "Let us begin the assessment of our defensive posture along the Epsilon Draconis perimeter." The holographic display in the center of the table illuminated, showing the vast starscape of the Empire's territory. Little did they know that this routine briefing would soon be interrupted by news that would challenge everything they believed about their military supremacy and about the supposedly harmless human refugees. Lieutenant Cora's shift at Border Station Epsilon 9 had been uneventful for the past 14 hours. Located at the edge of Imperial space, these monitoring stations served as early warning systems against potential incursions. Most days, that meant cataloging the movements of merchant vessels, identifying the occasional smuggler, and logging sensor data for Imperial intelligence. The soft ping of an anomalous reading barely registered at first. Such alerts were common, usually debris, solar flares, or equipment malfunctions. But as Cora examined the data more closely, her posture stiffened. "Station Commander," she called out, her voice tight with tension. "I'm detecting multiple objects approaching from Sector 12B. Commander Jirev moved to her station with a hint of annoyance. "Merchant convoy?" "Negative, sir. These aren't registering with standard identification protocols, and there are—" She paused, rechecking the readings. "Approximately 250 distinct vessels." Jirev's expression changed instantly. 250. Confirm that reading." "Confirmed, sir. They're maintaining perfect formation, unnaturally perfect. And the energy signatures." She manipulated the controls, enhancing the scan. "They're enormous." The commander stared at the display in disbelief. No known species in the Outer Rim could field such a fleet. Even the Empire would need to draw ships from multiple sectors to assemble such a force. "Alert Imperial Command immediately," he ordered. "Priority Alpha." As Cora transmitted the emergency signal, the sensor readings became clearer. The approaching vessels were diverse in size and configuration, not the standardized designs of a military fleet. Yet they moved with coordinated precision that suggested sophisticated control systems. "Sir," Cora's voice was barely a whisper now, "based on the configuration and energy signatures, these appear to be human vessels." Jirev almost laughed. "That's impossible. Humans don't have military capability beyond a few defensive systems on their refugee ships. These aren't military vessels. Sir, at least they weren't originally. But they've been modified." The commander leaned closer to examine the readings himself. What he saw sent a chill through his body. The approaching fleet contained everything from repurposed passenger liners to mining vessels and cargo haulers, all retrofitted with weapon systems and defensive capabilities that had no right to exist on civilian craft. "The humans have built an armada," he whispered, understanding the full implications. "Alert the fleet admiral directly. We need the battle fleet." In the command center of the Imperial flagship Dominion, Commander Vexar's strategic briefing with Admiral Creon was interrupted by a flashing red alert. The holographic display at the center of the table shifted automatically to show the incoming transmission from border station Epsilon 9. "What is the meaning of this?" Creon demanded, his voice sharp with irritation. The hologram of Commander Jirev appeared, his expression tense. "Fleet Admiral, we have an unprecedented situation. A massive fleet of approximately 250 vessels is approaching Imperial space near the Epsilon Draconis system." Vexar exchanged a quick glance with Colonel Veltar. No known power in the region could field such a force. "Identification?" Creon asked, his body language shifting subtly from annoyed to alert. "That's the most disturbing part, sir," Jirev replied. "They appear to be human vessels." A moment of silence fell over the command center. Then Creon laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "Commander, your sensors must be malfunctioning. Humans don't possess military capability of that scale." "With respect, Admiral, these aren't conventional military vessels. They're civilian ships that have been heavily modified. Mining vessels with weapon mounts, passenger liners with military-grade shields, cargo haulers carrying what appear to be drone swarms." Vexar stepped closer to the display, examining the sensor readings himself. "The formation is too precise for a civilian fleet," he noted. "And these energy readings..." Creon's expression hardened. "Transmit all sensor data immediately. Commander Jirev, maintain observation but do not engage. I am convening an emergency meeting of the Strategic Council." As the transmission ended, the command center erupted into controlled chaos. Officers moved with practiced efficiency to their battle stations, but the undercurrent of confusion was palpable. The Empire had contingencies for every conceivable threat: rebellions in the Outer Rim, incursions from known military powers, even theoretical first contact scenarios with new species. But nothing in their strategic doctrine addressed the possibility of humans, refugees, nomads, A species without a home world, fielding a fleet that could challenge Imperial power. "This doesn't make sense," Vexar muttered as he reviewed the incoming data. "Where did they acquire these capabilities? How have our intelligence services missed this?" Admiral Creon's voice cut through the noise of the command center. "Speculation is useless. Commander, prepare the battle fleet. Colonel Veltar, I want a complete analysis of our current military assets in the Epsilon Draconis sector. If this is truly a human armada, we need to understand their intentions and demonstrate that the Empire is prepared to respond with overwhelming force." As the officers dispersed to carry out their orders, Creon remained standing before the holographic display, studying the formation of the approaching fleet. After decades commanding Imperial forces, he had developed an instinct for threats, and something about this situation triggered a warning deep in his military mind. This wasn't just unexpected, it was impossible. And in his experience, impossible situations were the most dangerous of all. Ooh. Captain Mira Hayes stood on the bridge of the Liberty, once a luxury passenger liner that had transported wealthy tourists between resort worlds. Now, like everything else in the human fleet, it had been transformed by necessity. Where entertainment lounges had once occupied the forward sections, tactical systems now hummed with activity. The panoramic viewports remained, but they were now reinforced with additional layers of transparent armor. "Fleet status?" she asked, her voice calm despite the tension that gripped the bridge. Her first officer, Lieutenant Commander Jackson, consulted the holographic display. "All vessels report ready. Captain, formation is holding at parameters. The Horizon and Stardust have completed their drone deployments." Mira nodded, taking a moment to absorb the magnitude of what they were attempting. The human fleet, officially designated as the United Earth Exodus Armada, represented the entirety of their civilization. Every ship carried not just crew, but families, cultural artifacts, and the collective knowledge of a species that had been forced to abandon its dying homeworld. "The mining crews report all extraction drones have been converted as planned," Jackson continued. "Repair bots are standing by." "And the Zepyrian response?" "Their border station has detected us, as expected. They're transmitting alerts to their command structure." Mira allowed herself a small smile. "Good. We need their full attention." From the tactical station, Security Chief Rodriguez looked up with concern. "Captain, are we certain this is the right approach? The diplomatic option?" "Was considered and rejected," Mira interrupted firmly. "The Zepyrian Empire doesn't negotiate with species they consider inferior. They've turned away every diplomatic overture we've made over the past decade. So we're really doing this, challenging the most powerful military force in this sector of the galaxy." Mira turned to face the entire bridge crew. "We're not challenging them, we're surviving. Earth is gone. Our resources are limited. The fleet can't continue wandering indefinitely." She gestured toward the view screen, where the stars of the Epsilon Draconis system were visible. "There are habitable worlds in that system, worlds that the Empire claims but hasn't colonized. Worlds they'll defend with everything they have," Rodriguez pointed out. "Which is why we need to change their perception of us," Mira replied. "For generations, they've seen humans as refugees, harmless, desperate, and weak. Today, we show them something different." At the communications station, Lieutenant Park raised her hand. "Captain, we're receiving transmissions from the Imperial Border Station. They're demanding we identify ourselves and state our intentions." "No response yet," Mira ordered. "Let them wonder. General Quinn, is your team ready?" The holographic image of General Marcus Quinn appeared on the command display. Once a security officer on a corporate mining vessel, Quinn had emerged as the Armada's leading military strategist, despite having no formal military training before the Exodus. "As ready as we'll ever be, Captain," Quinn replied. "The mining drones have been reprogrammed according to specifications. Combat training simulations show a 78% effectiveness rate against known Imperial defense systems. And the civilian crews? Quinn's expression was solemn. They understand what's at stake. Every ship captain has committed to the plan. Mira nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. We're not soldiers. We're not conquerors. We're families looking for a home. Remember that, all of you. She took her seat in the command chair, her posture straight and confident despite the fear she felt inside. Adjust course for the Epsilon Draconis primary world. Maintain formation and current speed. Let's show the Galactic Empire what humans can do when our survival is at stake. The Strategic Council chamber aboard the Imperial Command Station was rarely used for actual emergencies. Most often, it hosted ceremonial meetings where predetermined strategies were formally approved. Today, however, it served its true purpose as the Empire's highest military authorities gathered to address an unprecedented threat. Fleet Admiral Creon stood before the assembled council members, his expression grave as he activated the central holographic display. The three-dimensional image of the approaching human fleet rotated slowly above the table. 253 vessels, maintaining perfect formation despite their disparate designs and propulsion systems. He began. They've ignored all communication attempts from our border stations and continue on a direct course toward the Epsilon Draconis primary world. Supreme Commander Zivran, the Emperor's personal representative on the council, leaned forward. These are human vessels? The refugee species? Yes, Supreme Commander, although refugee may no longer be the appropriate designation. Colonel Veltar stepped forward, presenting the intelligence analysis. The fleet consists primarily of converted civilian vessels, mining ships, passenger liners, cargo haulers, and scientific vessels. However, our scans indicate significant modifications, mining lasers reconfigured as weapons, cargo bays converted to drone hangars, passenger compartments transformed into command centers. How is this possible? Demanded Admiral Corva, commander of the Imperial Home Fleet. Humans have been monitored for generations. They possess minimal industrial capacity, limited to basic maintenance of their existing vessels. Dr. Selena Thar, the Empire's leading xenobiologist, cleared her throat. If I may, Admirals, I believe we have fundamentally misunderstood human adaptability. All eyes turned to the scientist. Unlike the military officers, with their rigid postures and formal uniforms, Dr. Thar carried herself with the casual confidence of someone more concerned with facts than protocol. Explain, Creon ordered. Humans evolved on a planet with rapidly changing conditions. Dr. Thar began, activating her own data display. Their biological and cultural development was shaped by the need to adapt to different environments. When their planet began its terminal decline, they didn't develop a unified evacuation plan like a rational species would. Instead, they created hundreds of independent solutions, whatever ships they could build or repurpose. She gestured toward the holographic fleet. What we're seeing is an extension of that evolutionary trait. They've taken civilian technology and adapted it for military purposes, not because they plan to build an armada, but because adaptation is fundamental to their nature. Commander Vexar, who had been silently observing until now, spoke up. This still doesn't explain how they coordinated such modifications without detection. Our intelligence networks were looking for traditional military development. Dr. Thar interrupted. Weapons factories, shipyards, training facilities. The humans didn't build new weapons. They transformed their existing tools. Admiral Creon's expression remained impassive, but his mind was racing through the strategic implications. Regardless of how they achieved this, the question now is their intention, and our response. Supreme Commander Zivran's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. Their intention is irrelevant. They have assembled a war fleet and are approaching an Imperial world. The response is prescribed by Imperial doctrine. Overwhelming force, immediate deployment. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the council. The Empire had maintained its dominance through unwavering application of military power. Any sign of hesitation would be interpreted as weakness. The third battle fleet is already in position, Admiral Corva noted. 120 warships, including 4 dreadnoughts, even with their adaptations. These human vessels cannot stand against proper Imperial warships. Admiral Creon studied the holographic display for a moment longer before nodding. Deploy the third fleet. Containment pattern Epsilon. I want those ships surrounded and given one opportunity to surrender. If they refuse or take hostile action, you are authorized to eliminate the threat. As the council members rose to implement the orders, Dr. Thar approached Creon privately. Admiral, there's something else you should consider. If these are indeed all the human vessels we've been tracking over the years, then this isn't just a fleet. Creon raised an eyebrow. Explain. It's their entire civilization, she said quietly. Every human in this sector of space may be aboard those ships, which means they're not just fighting for victory, they're fighting for survival. The Admiral's expression didn't change, but a flicker of concern passed through his eyes. Then they have made a grave miscalculation, because now, so are we. The vastness of space around the Epsilon Draconis system erupted with activity as the Imperial Third Battle Fleet emerged from hyperspace. The massive warships, sleek, predatory designs with the distinctive blue-white engine signatures of Zapirian technology, arranged themselves in a containment pattern around the approaching human fleet. On the bridge of the Liberty, Captain Mira Hayes watched the deployment with outward calm. Inside, her heart pounded against her ribs. 118 Imperial vessels detected, reported the sensor officer, including multiple Dreadnought-class ships. Lieutenant Commander Jackson let out a low whistle. That's almost a third of their active battle fleet. They're taking us seriously. As they should, Mira replied. Status of our formation. Holding steady. Captain, all ships report ready for Phase 1. On the main view screen, the Imperial fleet completed its encirclement maneuver. The precision was impressive, a testament to the military discipline that had allowed the Zapirian Empire to dominate this region of space for centuries. They're hailing us, Lieutenant Park announced from the communications station. Priority signal on all frequencies. Mira straightened her uniform jacket. This moment had been planned for months, rehearsed in countless simulations. On screen, the image of Admiral Corva appeared, tall, imposing, with the characteristic blue skin and silver eyes of the Zapirian species. His expression conveyed a mixture of contempt and curiosity. Unidentified human fleet, he began, his translator converting his speech to standard human language. You have entered Imperial space with vessels modified for combat purposes. This constitutes a hostile act against the Zapirian Empire. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded, or face immediate destruction. Mira met his gaze steadily. This is Captain Mira Hayes of the United Earth Exodus Armada. We acknowledge your transmission. Your acknowledgement is insufficient, Corva replied. You will comply with Imperial directives, or we will defend ourselves. Mira interrupted. The human species has requested settlement rights in the Outer Rim territories for decades. Each request has been denied without consideration. We are no longer asking. Admiral Corva's expression hardened. You threaten the Empire with a collection of modified civilian vessels. Your courage is noted, but your judgment is questionable. You have 5 minutes to power down your systems and prepare for boarding. There will be no further warnings. The transmission cut off abruptly. He seemed nice, Jackson commented dryly. Mira allowed herself a small smile before turning serious again. They're exactly as arrogant as we expected. Status of the drone systems. All mining and repair drones ready for deployment. Networked control systems online. Good. Transmit Phase 1 authorization to all ships. Drone deployment in 2 minutes. Throughout the human fleet, Cargo bay doors opened and hangar shields deactivated. From each vessel emerged swarms of small, utilitarian devices. Mining drones designed to extract minerals from asteroids, repair bots programmed to maintain hull integrity, and utility units meant for external ship maintenance. Thousands of these machines poured into space, their normally limited programming replaced with new instructions. On the Imperial flagship, Admiral Corva observed the deployment with confusion. "What are they doing? Those aren't weapons platforms." His tactical officer studied the sensor readings with growing concern. "Sir, those appear to be industrial drones, mining equipment, repair units." "Are they attempting to use those against our warships?" Corva asked incredulously. "Scan for explosive materials." "Negative on explosives," the tactical officer reported, "but they're swarming, forming patterns, and the energy readings are fluctuating in a coordinated sequence. Across the vacuum between the fleets, the drones arranged themselves in complex, three-dimensional formations. Each drone was individually insignificant, little more than a power source, basic propulsion, and specialized tools. But as thousands moved in perfect synchronization, something unexpected began to happen. "Sir," the Imperial sensor officer called out, alarm evident in his voice. "We're detecting multiple new contacts, capital ship signatures at coordinates 227 Mark 184. "Impossible," Corva snapped. "There were no ships at that position." But the sensor readings were clear. Where moments before there had been only empty space, now the instruments showed the distinct signatures of large vessels, signatures that matched known human ship designs, but amplified, enhanced. "More contacts appearing, surrounding our formation." Throughout the Imperial fleet, sensor systems reported the same phenomenon. Human capital ships seemingly materializing from nowhere, their energy signatures pulsing with impossible power levels. "It's a trick," Corva realized, his tactical mind cutting through the confusion. "Those drones are generating false sensor readings, projecting phantom ships." But the realization came too late for some Imperial captains. Believing themselves suddenly surrounded, several warships had already altered course and opened fire on the non-existent threats. The carefully coordinated Imperial formation began to fragment as ships responded to different perceived threats. "All vessels, disregard sensor contacts," Corva commanded over the fleet channel. "Focus on confirmed visual targets only. Maintain formation and—" His orders were interrupted as the actual human fleet surged forward, accelerating toward the now disorganized Imperial formation. The converted mining vessels led the charge. Their industrial cutting lasers, designed to slice through asteroid rock, now directed at Imperial shield generators. Cargo haulers released clouds of reflective particles, disrupting targeting systems. And throughout it all, the swarms of drones continued their elaborate dance, creating an ever-shifting tapestry of false sensor readings. "They're using industrial equipment as weapons," Corva murmured, a hint of reluctant admiration in his voice. "And those drones are creating a phantom fleet to confuse our sensors." On the Liberty, Captain Mira Hayes watched the initial engagement with intense focus. "Phase 1 is working. Their formation is breaking down. Commence Phase 2. Throughout the human fleet, secondary systems activated. Repair drones, normally used to patch hull breaches, attached themselves to Imperial vessels and began systematically targeting external sensor arrays and communication dishes. Mining charges, designed to break apart asteroids, detonated near shield generators. And perhaps most disruptive of all, the industrial gravity manipulators used for moving heavy cargo began projecting localized distortion fields around Imperial weapon emplacements. It wasn't warfare as the Empire understood it. There were no devastating energy barrages, no torpedo spreads, no fighter squadrons executing precision attack runs. Instead, the humans deployed thousands of small, seemingly innocuous systems that individually posed no threat, but collectively created chaos. The Empire expected a military confrontation. Mira told her bridge crew as they watched the Imperial formation dissolve into individual ships fighting their own separate battles. But we're not soldiers. We're survivors. And sometimes survival requires creativity rather than firepower. "Captain," Jackson called out, his voice tight with tension. "Imperial Dreadnought, designate Alpha 3 is moving to intercept our path to the planet. Their weapons are charged and targeting the Liberty directly." Mira's expression remained calm, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped the arms of her command chair. "Evasive pattern Haze 7. Deploy reflective screen and activate the gravity disruptors." The Liberty, once a luxury passenger liner, executed a maneuver that would have been impossible for its original configuration. Additional thrusters, salvaged from decommissioned mining shuttles, fired in perfect sequence, sending the massive ship into a roll that narrowly avoided the Imperial Dreadnought's first volley. "They're recalibrating," Jackson warned. "Second volley incoming." "Now, Lieutenant Park," Mira ordered. From the Liberty's cargo bays, a cloud of metallic particles dispersed into space, specialized material originally designed to reflect solar radiation away from sensitive mining equipment. As the Imperial energy weapons fired, the beams struck this reflective cloud. Most of the energy was scattered harmlessly into space, but portions reflected back toward the Imperial vessel, causing localized shield disruptions. "Direct hit on their forward shield generator," Jackson reported, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. "Their defensive capability is reduced by 23%. "Target their weapons control systems," Mira ordered. "Mining lasers. Full power." The Liberty's primary mining lasers, industrial tools converted to military purpose, fired in concert, individually. Each was a fraction as powerful as a true military weapon, but there were dozens mounted across the ship's hull, and they fired with perfect precision, all targeting the same vulnerability in the Dreadnought's compromised shield grid. Throughout the Epsilon Draconis system, similar scenes played out as the human fleet engaged the Imperial warships. It wasn't a battle in any conventional sense. It was industrial equipment repurposed as weapons, civilian vessels executing maneuvers they were never designed for, and thousands of drones creating a constantly shifting battlefield that defied Imperial tactical doctrine. And aboard the Imperial flagship, Admiral Corva watched with growing horror as his carefully organized battle fleet found itself unable to effectively combat an enemy that refused to fight according to the established rules of warfare. In the Strategic Council chamber aboard the Imperial Command Station, Fleet Admiral Creon reviewed the incoming battle reports with mounting concern. The holographic display showed the current state of the engagement. Imperial warships scattered, their formation broken, engaged in individual battles against human vessels that should have been easily destroyed. "This is unprecedented," Colonel Veltar admitted, his usual composure shaken. "The Third Fleet reports that their sensor systems are being systematically compromised. Communication between vessels is disrupted, and their weapons are... They report their weapons are being redirected by localized gravity distortions." Supreme Commander Zevran's holographic image flickered with interference as he joined the emergency session from the Imperial capital. "How is this possible? These are civilian vessels." "Were civilian vessels," Dr. Selena Thar corrected, studying the data with scientific interest. "The humans have essentially created a new form of warfare based on their industrial technology. Those aren't military drones. They're mining equipment programmed to create false sensor readings." Commander Vexar, who had been analyzing the tactical data, looked up. "They're not trying to destroy our ships," he realized. "They're neutralizing our capabilities, targeting sensors, communications, weapon control systems." Admiral Creon's expression remained impassive, but a new respect had entered his eyes. "They can't match our firepower, so they're making firepower irrelevant. Clever. Clever." Zevran's hologram virtually exploded with indignation. "This is an affront to Imperial military doctrine. These Refugees are using industrial equipment against the most powerful fleet in the sector. And succeeding, Creon noted quietly. The chamber fell silent at this admission. The Empire's military superiority had been unchallenged for so long that the concept of failure was almost incomprehensible. Admiral Corva requests reinforcements, Colonel Veltar reported. He believes with additional vessels, they can overwhelm the human tactics through sheer numbers. Admiral Creon studied the holographic battle display, his tactical mind analyzing patterns, weaknesses, opportunities. No, he said finally. More ships would only create more targets for their unconventional methods. We need to understand what they truly want. They want to challenge the Empire, Zevran insisted, to humiliate us. No species commits its entire civilization to battle merely for humiliation. Dr. Thar countered, if these are indeed all the human ships we've been tracking, then they've committed everything they have to this confrontation. There must be a greater purpose. Creon nodded slowly. The Epsilon Draconis system, specifically the fourth planet, it's within our territorial claims but remains uncolonized. They seek to steal Imperial territory? Zevran's outrage was palpable even through the holographic interface. Perhaps they seek to survive, Dr. Thar suggested quietly. Their homeworld is gone. They've been wandering for generations. Perhaps this isn't an invasion. It's a last, desperate attempt to find a permanent home. Admiral Creon's gaze remained fixed on the battle display, where Imperial warships continued to struggle against tactics they had never anticipated. Contact Captain Hayes, he ordered suddenly. I wish to speak with her directly. Colonel Veltar appeared startled. Sir, Supreme Command has not authorized negotiations. I'm not negotiating, Creon replied, his voice carrying the weight of decades of command. I'm gathering intelligence, and perhaps preventing the unnecessary destruction of the Third Fleet. As his officers moved to establish the communication link, Creon studied the movements of the human vessels more carefully. There was a pattern to their tactics, a focus on disabling rather than destroying. Even when presented with opportunities to deliver killing blows to damaged Imperial ships, they instead targeted systems that would render the vessel's combat ineffective without causing catastrophic damage. They're fighting like they have something to lose, he murmured to himself, but also like they have something to protect. The holographic display shifted, and the image of Captain Mira Hayes appeared. Despite the chaotic battle raging around her ship, she appeared composed, her expression resolute. Admiral Creon, she acknowledged. I'm surprised the Empire is willing to talk while our ships are still engaging. This is not a negotiation, Captain Hayes, Creon replied formally. I merely seek to understand your purpose. You must realize that even if you achieve tactical success in this engagement, the Empire can deploy 10 times this number of warships. You cannot hope to prevail. Hayes's expression didn't waver. With respect, Admiral, your definition of prevail may differ from ours. We're not seeking to defeat the Zapirian Empire. We're seeking to demonstrate that the cost of denying our request is higher than the cost of granting it. And what request is that? The same one we've made through diplomatic channels for the past 12 years. Settlement rights on Epsilon Draconis 4. An uncolonized world within your claimed territory, but far from your population centers. Creon's eyes narrowed slightly. You risk war for a single planet? We risk everything for a home, Hayes corrected. Admiral, what you're seeing isn't a military fleet. It's our entire civilization. Every human in this sector of space is aboard these ships. We've been wandering for generations since Earth became uninhabitable. We cannot continue indefinitely. The Admiral was silent for a moment, processing this information. You could have approached other powers, species who might have welcomed you. We tried, Hayes replied, a hint of bitterness entering her voice. The consortium was willing to accept a small percentage of our population as laborers in their mining operations. The Vex Confederacy offered to integrate us by dispersing our people across 50 different worlds, effectively ending our cultural identity. And the Zapirian Empire, she paused. The Empire simply ignored us, treated us as insignificant nomads not worthy of serious consideration. Behind Creon, the Strategic Council members watched the exchange with varying expressions. Supreme Commander Zivran with barely contained outrage, Colonel Veltar with tactical assessment, and Dr. Thar with scientific curiosity. "So you converted your civilian fleet into weapons," Creon stated. "We adapted," Hayes corrected. "It's what humans do. We take what we have and transform it to meet our needs. Right now, our need is to demonstrate that we cannot be dismissed." The transmission was briefly interrupted by static as an explosion rocked the Liberty's bridge. Hayes maintained her composure, adjusting controls on her command chair. "You should know, Admiral," she continued once the connection stabilized, "that we're broadcasting this conversation to every ship in our fleet. Every human can hear your response. Will the mighty Zapirian Empire acknowledge our right to exist? Or will you commit to destroying an entire species rather than share one uninhabited world in your vast territory?" Creon recognized the maneuver for what it was. A calculated attempt to force a public response, to transform a military confrontation into a moral one. And yet, he couldn't deny the effectiveness of the strategy. The Empire's strength had always been its absolute military superiority. But faced with an enemy that fought in unexpected ways, that leveraged industrial technology against military might, that sought survival rather than conquest, the traditional response seemed suddenly inadequate. "This conversation is concluded," he said finally. "But the matter will be given further consideration. Maintain your current position and cease offensive operations against Imperial vessels. Any attempt to approach Epsilon Draconis IV will be met with the full force of the Imperial fleet." As Hayes's image disappeared from the holographic display, Supreme Commander Zivran exploded with indignation. "Further consideration, Admiral? You cannot possibly be contemplating accommodation with these refugees who dare to challenge Imperial authority." Admiral Creon turned to face the Council, his expression unreadable. "What I am contemplating, Supreme Commander, is the most effective resolution to the current situation. Dr. Thar, you studied human history before their exodus. In their conflicts, what happened when they were cornered, when they faced extinction?" The xenobiologist considered for a moment. "They became extraordinarily dangerous. Human historical records show that when facing existential threats, they would often accept enormous casualties to achieve victory. They called it fighting with their backs to the wall, a reference to having no retreat option. And that is precisely the situation we face," Creon observed. "We are not fighting a conventional enemy seeking territory or resources. We are fighting an entire species that believes its survival depends on this confrontation." He gestured toward the battle display, where Imperial ships continue to struggle against the unorthodox human tactics. "They've committed everything they have. They cannot retreat. They cannot surrender, because for them, there is nowhere else to go." Colonel Veltar studied the tactical display thoughtfully. "Their approach is unorthodox but effective, converting industrial equipment into weapons, using swarms of mining drones to create sensor ghosts, employing gravity manipulators to disrupt our targeting systems." He looked up at Creon. "These are not tactics we have encountered before, nor tactics we are effectively countering." Creon agreed. "Which leaves us with a choice. Escalate the conflict by committing additional fleet assets, potentially destroying their entire civilization, or explore alternatives. The Empire does not compromise with inferior species," Zivran insisted. Admiral Creon's voice remained steady. "The Empire survives by making intelligent, strategic decisions, and I submit that destroying a species that has demonstrated such remarkable adaptability, a species that converted mining equipment into weapons capable of neutralizing Imperial warships, may not be in our long-term strategic interest. Dr. Thar nodded in agreement. Their technological creativity could be an asset rather than a threat, if properly directed. As the council debated, Admiral Creon returned his attention to the battle display. The human fleet had ceased its advance toward the planet, but maintained its defensive operations. Imperial vessels continued to struggle against the swarms of drones and unconventional weapons. It wasn't a decisive victory for either side, but it represented something unprecedented, a challenge to Imperial military supremacy that couldn't be easily dismissed. And somewhere in the vastness of space, aboard vessels never designed for combat, an entire civilization waited to learn whether they had found a home or initiated their own extinction. Aboard the Liberty. Captain Mira Hayes watched the tactical display with growing concern. The initial success of their unconventional tactics had created a stalemate rather than a victory. Imperial warships remained combat-capable, if confused and disorganized. And the human fleet, while still functional, was consuming resources at an unsustainable rate. "Status report," she requested, her voice betraying none of the exhaustion she felt after 36 hours of continuous engagement. Lieutenant Commander Jackson consulted his display. Mining drone reserves down to 28%. Reflective material depleted on 37 vessels. Power systems on the outer ring ships showing strain from continuous operation of industrial equipment at military capacity. Mira nodded, absorbing the information. Their strategy had always been built around a calculated gamble, that they could disrupt Imperial military operations long enough to force a reconsideration of their settlement request. But they couldn't maintain this level of engagement indefinitely. What about the Imperial fleet? Still maintaining their blockade position around Epsilon Draconis 4. They've adapted some countermeasures against our drone swarms, focusing on visual targeting rather than sensor readings. But they haven't pressed their advantage. They're waiting, Mira realized. Admiral Creon is considering his options. From the science station, Dr. Eleanor Chen looked up. "Captain, I'm detecting unusual activity from the Imperial Command Station. They're deploying what appears to be a large-scale communication array. Targeting us? No. It's omnidirectional, broadcasting on all standard frequencies, including those used by our internal fleet communications." Mira frowned. The Empire's military doctrine emphasized secure, encrypted communications, not broad-spectrum broadcasting. "Put it on screen." The main view screen activated, showing the image of Fleet Admiral Creon. Unlike their previous communication, he was not seated in the command center but standing in what appeared to be a formal reception chamber, with the Imperial insignia prominently displayed behind him. "Attention, vessels of the United Earth Exodus Armada," he began, his voice carrying the formal tone of official Imperial proclamation. "This message is transmitted to all ships in both fleets and to Imperial Command." Mira exchanged a glance with Jackson. This was unprecedented, an Imperial admiral making a public address in the middle of a military engagement. The recent confrontation between Imperial forces and human vessels has demonstrated several realities that require acknowledgement. Creon continued. First, that the human species possesses technological creativity and adaptive capabilities that have been previously underestimated. Second, that their current situation as a civilization without a permanent homeworld has created an existential determination that makes conventional military resolution problematic. Throughout the human fleet, crew members gathered around communication screens, listening to the Imperial Admiral's words with cautious hope. After generations of being ignored or dismissed by the great powers of this sector, they were being acknowledged, not just as refugees, but as a civilization worthy of consideration. Therefore, by the authority vested in me as Fleet Admiral of the Zepyrian Empire, I hereby authorize the following provisional arrangement. Creon declared. The human fleet will be permitted to establish a temporary settlement facility in orbit around Epsilon Draconis 4 for the purpose of evaluating the planet's suitability for permanent habitation. Cheers erupted across the Liberty's bridge, quickly silenced by Mira's raised hand as Creon continued. This facility will operate under joint supervision, with Imperial observers present to ensure compliance with territorial regulations. A formal diplomatic delegation will be convened within 30 standard days to negotiate terms for potential permanent settlement rights. The Admiral's expression remained formal, but there was a subtle shift in his tone, a hint of respect that hadn't been present in their earlier communications. The Empire acknowledges the unique circumstances of the human species and recognizes that conventional diplomatic channels have proven inadequate for addressing their situation. This provisional arrangement represents an opportunity to establish a new framework for interaction, one based on mutual recognition rather than conflict. As the transmission ended, the Bridge of the Liberty erupted in a mixture of cheers, tears, and embraces. After generations of wandering, after converting their civilian fleet into an improvised armada, after risking everything on a desperate gamble, they had achieved what countless diplomatic overtures had failed to secure: recognition of their right to exist as a civilization with a permanent home. Lieutenant Commander Jackson approached Mira, his expression a mixture of joy and disbelief. He actually did it. The Empire is letting us stay. Provisionally, Mira cautioned, though she couldn't suppress her own smile. With observers and negotiations to follow, this isn't a victory. It's an opportunity. But it's more than we've ever had before, Jackson pointed out. A chance to build something permanent, to stop running. Mira nodded, allowing herself to feel the full weight of the moment. Signal the fleet. Begin conversion of the forward vessels into the orbital platform configuration we designed. And prepare a response to Admiral Creon, a formal acceptance of the provisional arrangement. As her officers moved to implement these orders, Mira turned to the view screen, where the blue-green surface of Epsilon Draconis 4 was visible beyond the Imperial blockade. It wasn't Earth. Nothing would ever replace their lost homeworld. But after generations of existing as nomads, of converting every available resource into the means of survival, they had found something almost as precious: a future. Super! The orbital reception station that formed over the next 3 weeks was unlike anything in Imperial architectural records. Constructed from components of human vessels, habitat sections from passenger liners, docking facilities from cargo haulers, environmental systems from mining ships, it grew into a sprawling, asymmetrical structure that somehow achieved a form of chaotic harmony. Fleet Admiral Creon observed the construction from the observation deck of the Imperial diplomatic vessel Concordance. Beside him, Dr. Selena Thar studied the emerging station with scientific interest. "Fascinating," she commented. "They're not following any standardized construction protocols. Each section is being adapted in real time to connect with the others." "Is it structurally sound?" Creon asked, professional concern evident in his voice. "Remarkably so. They're using industrial gravity manipulators to maintain structural integrity where conventional engineering would fail. It's creative." Creon nodded, watching as a section of what had once been a luxury passenger liner was carefully maneuvered into position by swarms of the same mining drones that had so effectively confused Imperial sensors during the confrontation. Creative, indeed. The door to the observation deck slid open, admitting Supreme Commander Zivran. His expression made it clear that he remained displeased with the arrangement. "The Emperor is still awaiting your full explanation for this accommodation," he said without preamble. "Allowing an inferior species to establish presence on an Imperial world, even an uncolonized one, creates a concerning precedent." Creon turned to face him. "The Emperor will receive my complete strategic assessment, including my analysis that the humans represent a potential asset rather than a liability." "Asset," Zivran repeated incredulously. "They challenged Imperial military authority." "They adapted," Creon corrected, echoing Captain Hayes's words. "And adaptation is a quality the Empire has sometimes lacked. Our military doctrine has remained essentially unchanged for 3 centuries. Our technological development has focused on refining existing systems rather than creating new approaches. He gestured toward the emerging station. Look at what they've accomplished in 3 weeks. They've converted warships back into habitation modules, transformed weapon systems into construction tools, created an orbital platform using technology that our engineers insist shouldn't be compatible. Dr. Thar nodded in agreement. The preliminary cultural exchange has been equally illuminating. Their educational methods, their artistic expressions, all shaped by centuries of existence in spacecraft never designed for permanent habitation. They've developed unique solutions to problems the Empire has never needed to consider. Zivran's expression remained skeptical, but something in Creon's words had penetrated his initial rejection. You believe they could contribute to Imperial advancement. I believe that diversity of approach strengthens rather than weakens, Creon replied. The Empire has dominated through uniformity and standardization, but the galaxy is not uniform. Perhaps exposure to different methodologies will enhance our capabilities rather than diminish them. Before Zivran could respond, a junior officer approached. Admiral, the human delegation has arrived for the scheduled conference. Creon nodded. Inform them we will join them shortly. As the officer departed, he turned back to Zivran. Observe today's negotiations with an open mind. Supreme Commander, you may find that these refugees have more to offer than we initially believed. The conference chamber aboard the Concordance had been specially prepared for the occasion. The traditional imperial configuration, with representatives of lesser powers seated in lower positions, had been replaced with a circular arrangement that placed all participants on equal footing. It was a small gesture, but a significant one in imperial diplomatic practice. Captain Mira Hayes entered with her delegation, a diverse group that included ship captains, scientific specialists, and cultural representatives. They had abandoned the makeshift military attire of the confrontation, instead wearing clothing that reflected their diverse origins before the Exodus. Some wore the practical jumpsuits of mining vessel crews, others the more formal attire of academic institutions, and still others garments that incorporated elements of Earth's cultural heritage. Admiral Creon stepped forward to make the formal introductions. Captain Hayes, on behalf of the Zapirian Empire, I welcome you to these preliminary settlement discussions. Mira inclined her head slightly. Admiral Creon, on behalf of the United Earth Exodus Armada, I thank you for this opportunity. Our people have waited generations for a chance to establish a permanent home. As the delegations took their seats, Creon noted the change in Hayes's demeanor. During the confrontation, she had projected military resolve and determination. Now, with the possibility of peaceful resolution before her, she radiated a different kind of strength, the quiet confidence of a leader whose primary concern was the welfare of her people rather than victory in battle. Before we begin the formal negotiations, Creon said, I believe it would be beneficial for both parties to clearly understand each other's positions and constraints. Captain Hayes, perhaps you could share with us the full circumstances that led to your unconventional approach to securing settlement rights. Mira glanced at her delegation, receiving nods of approval before activating a holographic display in the center of the conference table. The image showed a fleet of civilian vessels, passenger liners, cargo haulers, mining ships, in their original configuration before the military adaptations. This was the United Earth Exodus Armada as it existed for generations. She began. After Earth's biosphere collapsed due to environmental degradation, our ancestors were forced to abandon their homeworld. There was no coordinated evacuation plan. Each nation, corporation, or private collective launched whatever vessels they could construct or repurpose. The holographic display shifted, showing the fleet wandering through different star systems over a timeline spanning centuries. For over 300 years, we existed as nomads, mining what resources we could find, trading with species willing to engage with us, constantly moving to avoid depleting any single region. Supreme Commander Zivran leaned forward. Why not settle on unclaimed worlds? There are habitable planets beyond Imperial territory. We tried, Mira replied. 3 times, we attempted to establish colonies on unclaimed worlds. Each time, we faced insurmountable challenges. Indigenous microorganisms our immune systems couldn't resist. Atmospheric composition that proved toxic over long exposure, or gravitational conditions that caused developmental issues in children born on the surface. Dr. Selina Thar nodded in understanding. Human physiology evolved specific to Earth's conditions. Finding a compatible planet would be statistically challenging. Exactly, Mira confirmed, which is why Epsilon Draconis 4 is so significant. Our preliminary scans indicate a 97% compatibility with human biological requirements. The gravity, atmospheric composition, radiation levels, all within parameters our people can thrive in without extensive genetic modification. The holographic display changed again, showing the human fleet's transformation from civilian vessels to the improvised Armada that had challenged the Imperial blockade. This was never our preferred approach. Mira continued, her voice solemn. For 12 years, we attempted to secure settlement rights through diplomatic channels. When those efforts failed, we were left with a choice: continue our increasingly unsustainable nomadic existence, or take direct action. Admiral Creon studied the display thoughtfully. The resources required for this military conversion must have been considerable. Everything we had, Mira confirmed. Every spare component, every reserve power cell, every piece of industrial equipment that could be repurposed. We committed our entire civilization to this effort, because we had no alternative. The room fell silent as the implications of this statement registered with the Imperial delegation. These weren't conquerors seeking territory for expansion. They were survivors who had transformed everything they possessed into a desperate bid for a permanent home. I believe we have sufficient context to proceed with the substantive negotiations, Creon said finally. The provisional arrangement grants temporary settlement rights while we establish permanent terms. Let us discuss what those terms might entail. For the next several hours, the delegations engaged in detailed discussions of territorial boundaries, resource utilization rights, cultural exchange protocols, and security arrangements. Throughout the process, Creon observed the human representatives with growing interest. Their approach to negotiation was unlike the formal, hierarchical method favored by imperial diplomats. Instead, they operated collaboratively, with different specialists contributing to various aspects of the discussion without rigid adherence to rank or position. By the end of the session, the outlines of a permanent arrangement had begun to take shape, one that would allow human settlement on Epsilon Draconis 4 under nominal imperial sovereignty, but with substantial autonomy in internal governance and cultural development. As the formal proceedings concluded, Creon approached Mira privately. Your people have demonstrated remarkable resourcefulness. Captain Hayes, converting civilian vessels into an effective fighting force was unexpected. Mira smiled slightly. We prefer to think of it as adaptive repurposing. Admiral, necessity has been our primary innovation driver for generations. And now that necessity is changing, Creon observed, from survival to establishment, from wandering to settlement. Yes, though I suspect our adaptive tendencies will remain. She gestured toward the viewport, where the orbital station was visible. Its unconventional design a testament to human creativity. We've lived in space for so long that I doubt we'll ever fully return to planetary existence. Some of our people will remain in orbit, continuing to develop the technologies and methods that kept us alive during our exodus. Creon considered this. Perhaps that dual perspective, both planetary and space-based, will prove valuable in future collaborations. Collaborations? Mira's eyebrow raised slightly. I was under the impression the Empire preferred to develop technologies internally. Traditional doctrine? Yes. Creon acknowledged. But recent events have suggested that traditional doctrine may benefit from adaptation. The word hung between them, a subtle acknowledgement that the confrontation had changed more than just the humans' circumstances. Perhaps the Empire, too, had been altered by the encounter, forced to reconsider assumptions about military superiority, technological development, and the treatment of species previously dismissed as insignificant. I look forward to exploring those possibilities. Admiral, Mira said, once our people are securely established. As she departed with her delegation, Creon remained at the viewport, watching the activity around the orbital station. Human shuttles were already beginning preliminary landings on the planet's surface, scientific teams establishing environmental monitoring stations, engineers surveying potential settlement locations. Dr. Thar joined him, following his gaze. They work quickly. They've waited generations for this opportunity, Creon replied. I expect they'll make the most of it. Do you believe the Emperor will ratify the permanent settlement agreement? Creon considered the question carefully. The Empire has always valued strength and capability. These humans have demonstrated both, not through conventional military power, but through adaptation and resourcefulness. They converted mining equipment into weapons capable of confounding our most advanced warships. Imagine what they might accomplish as allies rather than adversaries. Allies? Dr. Thar's surprise was evident. That's a significant evolution in Imperial policy toward non-Zephyrian species. Perhaps such evolution is overdue, Creon suggested. The galaxy continues to change. The Empire must adapt or risk stagnation. He turned from the viewport. His decision made? I will recommend full ratification of the settlement agreement, with provisions for technological and cultural exchange programs. The humans have much to teach us about adaptation, and we have much to offer them in terms of stability and security. As Admiral Creon departed to prepare his formal recommendation to the Emperor, the viewport continued to display the scene unfolding around Epsilon Draconis IV. The human orbital station, assembled from components never designed to fit together, expanded with each passing hour. On the planet's surface, the first temporary structures were already rising, the beginning of a permanent human settlement after centuries of nomadic existence. And throughout both the human fleet and the Imperial observation vessels, a new understanding was taking shape. That strength came in many forms, that adaptation could be as powerful as domination, and that two civilizations with vastly different histories might find unexpected value in each other's perspectives. 6 months later, the settlement on Epsilon Draconis IV, now officially designated New Haven in human records and Cooperative Protectorate 7 in Imperial documentation, had grown from a collection of temporary structures to a thriving community. The initial landing zones had expanded into organized districts, with architectural styles that blended practical spacecraft-derived designs with more traditional Earth-inspired elements. Captain Mira Hayes, now serving as the settlement's first governor, stood on the observation platform of the administrative center, watching as a mixed group of human and Zephyrian engineers worked on the installation of a new communication array. The sight still struck her as remarkable. Imperial technical specialists working alongside human engineers, each contributing different approaches to the shared project. Governor Hayes, a voice called from behind her, the latest population report is ready for your review. Mira turned to find her former first officer, now Chief Administrator Jackson, approaching with a data tablet. Thank you. Administrator, any significant changes? Steady growth, Jackson replied. Another 200 residents have transferred from orbital habitation to surface dwelling this month, and the first natural birth in the new medical center occurred yesterday, a healthy baby girl. Her parents have named her Terra. Mira smiled at the symbolism. Terra, the ancient name for Earth, now given to a child who would grow up with solid ground beneath her feet rather than spacecraft decking. That's wonderful news. And the Imperial Liaison Office? Commander Vexar reports that the cultural exchange program is exceeding expectations. Apparently, several Imperial citizens have requested assignment to the joint research initiatives here. Our approaches to environmental adaptation are generating significant interest. This didn't surprise Mira. The Empire's technological development had focused on domination and standardization, creating powerful, uniform systems that could be deployed throughout their territory. Human technology, in contrast, had been shaped by necessity and limitation, finding creative ways to repurpose limited resources, to adapt existing systems for new functions, to achieve maximum efficiency with minimal materials. The complementary nature of these approaches had become increasingly evident as the settlement developed. Imperial standardization provided stability and reliability, while human adaptability offered innovation and flexibility. Together, they were creating systems more effective than either civilization could have developed independently. "Governor," Jackson said, lowering his voice slightly, "there's something else you should know. The communication array we're installing today. It's not just for local use. The Empire is establishing a direct link between New Haven and the Imperial capital. Apparently, Admiral Creon has been appointed to a new position, Special Advisor on Cooperative Development." Mira raised an eyebrow. "That's unexpected. The Admiral was always more progressive than most Imperial officials, but this suggests a more significant shift in Imperial policy." "Exactly. And there are rumors that the Emperor is considering establishing similar cooperative protectorates with other non-Zapirian species previously dismissed as insignificant." The implications were profound. The Empire had maintained its dominance through military superiority and technological standardization. But the confrontation with the human Armada and the subsequent demonstration of human adaptive capabilities had apparently triggered a re-evaluation of that approach. "Well," Mira said after a moment of reflection, "it seems our desperate gamble has yielded more than just a home for our people." Jackson nodded. "Who would have thought that converting mining drones into sensor ghosts would lead to a diplomatic revolution?" As they shared a smile at this observation, a transport shuttle descended toward the landing pad adjacent to the administrative center. The distinctive blue-white engine signature identified it as an Imperial diplomatic vessel. "We're not expecting an official visit today, are we?" Mira asked. Jackson checked his schedule. "No, nothing on the calendar." The shuttle completed its landing sequence, and the main hatch opened to reveal a familiar figure, Fleet Admiral Creon, now dressed in the formal diplomatic attire of an Imperial special advisor rather than his military uniform. Mira moved to the landing pad to greet him. "Admiral Creon, this is an unexpected honor." Creon inclined his head in greeting. "Governor Hayes, I apologize for arriving without prior notice, but my new assignment has only just been formalized, and I wish to deliver the news personally. Your appointment as special advisor, Administrator Jackson just informed me. Congratulations." "Thank you, but that's not the only development." Creon gestured toward the settlement spreading out below them. "The Emperor has reviewed the progress of New Haven over the past 6 months and has made a decision regarding its status." Mira felt a momentary tension. The provisional arrangement had always been subject to Imperial review and potential revision. "I see. And what has the Emperor decided?" "That the cooperative protectorate model has proven more successful than anticipated," Creon replied. "Effective immediately. New Haven is being reclassified as an autonomous allied territory, with full self-governance rights and formal representation in Imperial diplomatic functions." Mira stared at him in surprise. "That's unprecedented. No non-Zapirian settlement has ever been granted such status. As I said, the Emperor is impressed with the results of our cooperation." Creon's expression remained formal, but there was a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. "The adaptive technologies developed here over the past 6 months have already been implemented in several Imperial facilities, with notable improvements in efficiency and resource utilization." He handed her a data crystal containing the official proclamation. This represents more than just a change in administrative classification. Governor Hayes, it's an acknowledgement that the Empire's traditional approach to non-Zapirian species may have limited our potential for growth and development. And all it took was a fleet of converted civilian vessels threatening an Imperial world. Mira observed with a touch of irony. Creon actually smiled at this, a rare expression for a Zapirian of his rank. Sometimes, the most effective diplomatic statements are delivered by mining drones reprogrammed as sensor ghosts. As they walked together toward the administrative center, Mira reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From desperate refugees converting every available resource into improvised weapons, to settlers building a new home under the protection of the very empire they had confronted. From being dismissed as insignificant nomads, to being recognized as valuable allies with unique perspectives and capabilities. "There's something else you should know," Creon said as they entered the building. "The Emperor has authorized preliminary discussions with representatives of several other non-Zapirian species previously denied settlement rights within Imperial territory. Your diplomatic team's expertise would be valuable in these negotiations." Mira understood the significance of this request. The humans were being asked not just to establish their own settlement, but to help facilitate a broader transformation in Imperial policy toward other species in similar circumstances. "I believe we can arrange that," she replied. "After all, if there's one thing humans understand, it's the importance of finding a place to call home." As they continued their discussion of this new diplomatic initiative, the settlement of New Haven continued its development around them. In orbit, the station, constructed from components of the human fleet, had evolved into a thriving spaceport, where vessels from both civilizations docked and exchanged goods, technologies, and ideas. On the surface, the mixture of human adaptability and Imperial standardization was creating a community unlike any that had existed before. Neither fully Earth-derived nor typically Imperial, but something new and promising. And throughout both the settlement and the broader galactic community, a new understanding was emerging. That true strength came not from dominance alone, but from the ability to adapt, to learn from others, and to recognize value in diversity rather than uniformity. It was a lesson the humans had learned through centuries of survival against overwhelming odds, and one the Empire was now beginning to appreciate through their unexpected encounter with a fleet of civilian vessels that refused to be dismissed as insignificant. In the end, what had begun as a confrontation between the mighty Galactic Empire and a desperate human armada had transformed into something neither side had anticipated, a partnership that promised to enhance both civilizations, and perhaps, in time, to change the nature of power and influence throughout this sector of the galaxy. For the humans of New Haven, it meant more than just survival. It meant a future where their unique perspectives and adaptive capabilities were valued rather than dismissed. And for the Zapirian Empire, it offered a new path forward, one where strength came not just from military might and standardization, but from the creative potential unleashed when diverse approaches were combined toward common goals. As Governor Mira Hayes looked out over the growing settlement that represented her people's new beginning, she couldn't help but reflect on the irony that after centuries of wandering, humans had finally found a home not by conforming to the expectations of the dominant power, but by demonstrating that adaptation and resourcefulness could be just as powerful as conventional military might. It wasn't the outcome anyone had expected when the human armada had first approached Imperial space. But perhaps that was fitting for a species whose greatest strength had always been the ability to transform challenging circumstances into unexpected opportunities, to convert mining equipment into weapons when necessary, and then to transform those same tools back into the means of building a new home when the opportunity arose. New Haven was more than just a settlement. It was a testament to human persistence, to Imperial reconsideration, and to the possibilities that emerged when different civilizations chose cooperation over conflict. And as the sun set over the community that embodied this new beginning, Both humans and Zephyrians could look toward the horizon with something that had once seemed impossible. Shared optimism for a future neither could have achieved alone.